Hey guys, today it's Bible study time and we'll be looking at the book of Jeremiah chapter 37 verse 1, and my topic today is godly fathers with troubled sons. The scripture urges parents to raise their children in the training and admonition of the Lord. You can look at this in Ephesians chapter 6 verse 4, and it never guarantees how children will turn out. Of course, we all know that even if you have 5 children, if a parent have give birth to 5 kids, they won't behave the same way. Even twins won't behave the same way. So each individual must decide whether to follow the Lord or ignore its commands. Even though our parents point their children in the right direction, emerging adults determine what they will eventually become. So the fact explains why godly parents can have spiritual rebellious children, and we all see this when you see a pastor who has kids and maybe 2 or 3 of his kids are not following the way of the Lord. They are doing their own things, and all of that. So we see these are practical examples, and this is this is why people of enormous faith and compassion can come from homes where God was dishonored or unknown. So Josiah was a faithful man and a ruler. You can see his profile in 2 Chronicles chapter 34 verse 1. But all of his 3 sons disobeyed God and paid a tragic price for it. Note that the other fathers in the scripture who honored the Lord, but whose sons largely deserted his way. So we're going to dissect into fathers and sons godly fathers who had troubled sons. So the first one is Isaac. Isaac pleaded with God to give his wife Rebekah a child. We can find this in Genesis chapter 25 verse 21. And his son Jacob used deception to derive his brother of his father's blessings. I mean, we can all remember this Bible story. God. And this set off generations of conflict. So you can read this in Genesis chapter 27 verse 6 to 29. Then later in his life, which is Jacob, he began to fear the Lord. You can read this in Genesis chapter 32 verse 24 to 32. Another person we need to look into is a godly father, which is Aaron, but his children Nadab and Abihu dishonored God in their official duties by offering profane fire before the Lord. You can find this in Leviticus chapter 10 verse 1 to 3. Another godly father here is Gideon. Gideon obeyed God's call to lead the Israelites in a successful route, in the successful route of the Midianites. But his son Abimelech hired assassins to murder his 70 brothers, and he led a treacherous assault on Shechem. You can find this in Judges chapter 9. Another man of God here is Manoah, who worshipped the Lord during a period of great spiritual darkness. But his son Samson dishonored his parents, visited prostitutes, gave little indication of fearing the Lord until the end of his life, which you can find in Judges chapter 14 to 16. Samuel honored God. He judged Israel with integrity and anointed his first 2 kings. You can find this in 1 Samuel chapter 3 verse 19 to 21. But his children Joel and Abijah accepted bribes and violated justice in their positions as judges in Beersheba. You can read this in 1 Samuel chapter 8 verse 1 to 5. Don't leave yet. David was appointed as God's choice. We all know the story, for Israel's king, and was described as a man after God's own heart. You can read this in 1 Samuel chapter 13 verse 14. But you see his children, Absalom, Adonijah, Solomon. Of course, we all know their stories, but let me talk about Solomon. Solomon feared the Lord in his youth, but later turned away from him, influenced by the idolatry of many wives. Of course, you know that Solomon had many wives and many concubines. You can read So Solomon, which is now Solomon, we talked about Solomon being one of the troubled sons. Now we're talking about Solomon being a godly father. Solomon was granted unprecedented wisdom by God. You can read this in 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 5 to 15. And he built and dedicated a temple. But you see his son Rehoboam rejected his father's wise counsels in favor of his own companions, whose advice triggered a permanent split in the kingdom. You can further read this in 1 Kings chapter 12 verse 1 to 19. It does not end there. Hezekiah was a godly man of God. He enacted numerous reforms and remained faithful to the Lord during the Assyrian siege of Jerusalem. But you see his son Manasseh, Manasseh thoroughly reversed his father's reforms, reinstituted idolatry, and ruled by violence. So you can read this in 2 Kings chapter 21. The last one, which is Josiah. Josiah, cleaned out temples, renewed the covenant, and restored proper worship of the Lord. But you see his children, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah, they continued the pattern of evil initiated by his brothers, served as a weak, vacillating ruler. So you can read this in 2 Kings chapter 24, verse 18 to 20. So what this particular word is telling us is that, even in our reality today, we have godly pastors, we have godly men of God, and their children are not even following the way of the Lord. So I pray that the Lord will give us wisdom, the Lord will grant us wisdom to go in the way of the Lord. And as we read this and as we learn from this, I pray that the Lord will give us more grace, to hear from him. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.